Hello and welcome back to the Beyond the Apex podcast. Today we are in Miami and I have got a smile bigger than I ever have before because Lando Norris won his first Grand Prix. It was one of the best days of my life, I won't lie.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I think we were all just a bit blown away. I think the fact that he won purely, not from like Max, just not, I don't know, having
He outpaced Max.
That's the word.
It was unbelievable, and it was a late nighter, but I didn't care. As soon as he crossed the line, we celebrated, and then me and my mate Benito headed straight to the McLaren Technology Centre when the sign went orange, and we just celebrated that one with so many McLaren fans at the NTC as well. There were so many there, and we were just all celebrating, cheering, kind of chanting for Lando. It was so good. So let's get into the race.
Right, okay, so we'll start with Red Bull. Obviously, we're talking about Lando Norris outpacing Red Bull.
Unbelievable.
Unreal.
Like, clearly, Red Bull have been caught up on upgrades, and obviously, it wasn't the weekend they were over for. They still ended the weekend with the most points out of any constructor.
Yeah.
However, they lost the race, and that is clearly going to kind of send some shivers down their spine because they're like, oh, actually, this season isn't going to be as easy as we thought it would be.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it really took them by surprise, and I think Max in the interview afterwards, because I did actually watch the race, in the interview afterwards, he was, I don't know, they asked him, like, how do you feel about getting second, but he was so laid back, he was like, it does not matter to him, He has just achieved everything he wants to in Formula 1 and more, and I think to give Lando this opportunity, it was just insane.
Max has always said that if he wasn't going to win, he wanted Lando to win. And I mean, as you said in the interviews afterwards, they were kind of asking, if it wasn't for the safety car, blah, blah, blah. And Max came out with the greatest line of all time with, if my mum had balls, she'd be my dad. And it just kind of, that summed up racing. Racing happens, and Lando outpaced him. There's been so many safety cars where Max has been behind, and Max has simply just overtaken people. But he wasn't able to this time, and that clearly shows a lack of pace in the Red Bull.
It does, and upgrades have worked.
Oh, upgrades have so worked. Obviously going on to Checo, he didn't have the kind of race that he wanted. He wasn't able to keep up with the Ferraris, which is also kind of a bit worrying for them, that Checo kind of isn't that rear gunner that they had at the start of the season. But it wasn't the weekend they hoped for.
No, it wasn't, and I think especially with obviously Norris kind of outpacing them, they kind of wanted that. Well, if that's going to happen, fair enough. But then you have like their two drivers; they're still strong in the standings.
Yes.
To have Leclerc finish in front of Perez, I don't think that's really that positive.
And Leclerc is now catching Checo in the standings as well. I mean, the least Checo can do is get vice champion in this car. But it's not looking good.
No.
But if we move on to Mercedes, obviously this weekend was a sprint weekend, and in the sprint we saw Lewis Hamilton being absolutely harassed by Kevin Magnussen. He picked up all the penalties in the world to keep Lewis behind and kind of build that gap to Hulkenberg, but it did kind of ruin Lewis's sprint. In the race, there was no real pace. They were the fourth fastest car, and it was some of that.
I think, I don't know, with Mercedes it's difficult because they're two strong drivers, but we're seeing that fourth fastest car pace because the team are just not bringing, obviously we've got the likes of McLaren and Ferrari really bringing that strength and the upgrades and things like that to obviously fight with Red Bull. But obviously I just don't see that happening with Mercedes.
No, I really don't. And every time they've kind of brought upgrades, they haven't improved the car as much as they would have thought. And it's all down to, I think, their simulator. Every time they bring upgrades, it's like the simulator says this is going to be 4 times quicker, and it's always wrong. Whereas with the likes of Ferrari and McLaren, their simulator are always wrong, but in the best way, because they're always saying the upgrades are going to be slower than they actually are. So with Mercedes, they just kind of don't have that, and it's kind of worrying for them.
It is worrying. I think going into next season as well, it is worrying. Obviously, they're losing Lewis.
Oh, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge for them.
2025.
Yes, and I mean, if he is that kind of star development driver that everyone kind of proclaims him to be, what are they going to do? Because George doesn't have that experience to kind of develop the car. And if they're bringing in the likes of Kimi Antonelli, I really hope I really think they're banking on 2026 and just kind of throwing 2025 away.
I think so. I think bringing like Kimi into that car would be just so unfair. I mean, we've talked about it before. I think putting him into some like a car for Williams is so much better. And with Mercedes being the way that they are right now, it just wouldn't work. Obviously with Lewis, he kind of understands the car. He's able to talk with the engineers and understand kind of the technical aspect of things to obviously improve stuff. But with Kimi, I just don't know if that would be possible, especially the first time in the car.
Yeah, and he's had so much lack of experience in kind of faster cars as well. So, I mean, he hasn't had any F3 experience. He hasn't really had any F2 experience. He would, as you say, have that kind of lack of technical knowledge to be able to improve the car. So it's going to be interesting. But I mean, going on to Ferrari, whose upgrades did kind of work, Leclerc had good pace and managed to stay in front of that second Red Bull.
Yeah, and I think obviously staying in front of Perez is just like a really good result for Ferrari anyway. They're going to be walking away thinking, yes, we are.
It's very, very promising.
It's very promising, yeah.
And they were the third fastest, and they bring in so many upgrades to Imola. Apparently it's going to be like a B-spec car, so hopefully it will be alright. In preface, we've already watched Imola, but hopefully they'll be alright. But moving on to McLaren, obviously we've spoken about them a lot, but the upgrades worked. They outpaced the Red Bull by about 4 tenths a lap at the end when Lando had clean air. Lando was fastest driver on track for the majority of the race, and it was just amazing.
Well, he was just pulling away. I think every lap it was just more and more. And I'm thinking, is this Max, or like have they got the transponder like switched around or something? Because like, what is going on?
And I did realise by the end of the race, well, not by the end of the race, by a few days after, that stuff was happening in the race, but I didn't actually realise because all I was watching for that last 30 laps was the gap between Max and Lando. That's all I was watching. Yeah. I wasn't even watching any of the action that was happening and didn't even realise it at the time.
I think that's a common occurrence though.
Yes, yeah, I think everyone was kind of just, please, Lando, don't crash. But apparently, he was fine by lap 30. His nerves were gone, he was like, I'm going to win this race. That makes one of you, Lando, because everyone else was absolutely booming themselves.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we move on to Oscar, obviously he had an amazing start, got up to P2, and was actually kind of challenging Max. Yeah. But unfortunately, the pit stops let him down because obviously the safety car came out at just the wrong time for him, but just the right time for Lando. So we will absolutely take that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll move on to Aston Martin now. I mean, just no pace.
Just no pace.
It's weird because I feel like we've said so much positive stuff about this team previously.
But I just feel like they're just kind of, their upgrades aren't working and then they're just kind of falling back.
Well, yeah, because everyone else
is going. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Stroll was rolling around at the back doing nothing. I mean, Alonso managed to get points, but it's not what he wants out of the car. And obviously he's signed up with his team for the long run now, so he's going to be hoping that some further upgrades are going to help.
Improve, absolutely. And obviously we're talking about one team doing bad, then the other team benefiting from it. We'll go on to Alpine.
A point for Ocon.
Yeah.
I mean, at the start of the season, we would not have predicted that because they were dead last. Yeah. But I think the main reason for this was they came with a much lighter car this weekend. It was 15 kilos lighter.
Wow.
Which is a huge difference. And it's not a tractor anymore.
No. And that's probably because it's 15 kilos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, it's like having Yuki in the car or something.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
But yeah, they're not a tractor anymore. They were able to fight, and Ocon got the first point of the season for Alpine, and he celebrated like hell.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I mean, good on him.
Yeah.
But going to another polarising, I mean, Williams just didn't have a good race.
No. And I think, Sargent.
Yeah, I mean, the incident between him and Magnussen, I mean, Magnussen got the penalty. I think it was Sargent's fault. Magnussen was there. He should have been entitled to room, and Sargent just turned in on him like he wasn't there. I mean, unfortunate for him, but it's racing. It's life.
It's racing, isn't it?
And Albon just didn't really have any pace either. I think he was running around at the back.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, 20 seconds off the pace. So it's not looking good for Williams at the moment. They it's coming back to that kind of 2022 kind of pace.
Yeah, I think they've lost kind of what they had previously, especially last season. And I don't know, I think we've spoken about it so much, like with Sargent, like the potential for what's going to happen next season.
Yeah. I mean, even halfway through the season. I mean, there are rumours that Williams has filed for kind of an exception from the rule for the under 18 drivers, so that if they needed to, Kimi could come into that car and take Sargent's spot. Is it going to happen? Who knows? But they've opened that avenue if they want to pursue it.
That's interesting.
But I mean, moving on to Racing Bulls.
Yeah.
Yuki Tsunoda take a bow again. Obviously coming back from China where he didn't have the best race to get the points.
Absolutely. I mean, and not something we'd really expect from Racing Bulls, I don't think.
No, they are really kind of pursuing expectations coming into this season.
Yeah.
And they're kind of consistently getting the points. Obviously Danny Rick hasn't had the best season.
No.
But managed to get the points in the sprint.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I think he's kind of come back. We did say, if he's going to be able to perform well enough in this race, if he doesn't, what could happen? Because, set the precedent, they set the precedent, could we see him no longer in F1, right? And I don't know whether this weekend really kind of, I don't know, pushed that more to the side.
I think it did. I think he kind of, he was given that ultimatum and he hit it on
He hit it on the head, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it was an amazing quality, and no one kind of believed that he was going to be able to keep that position. But he did, and fair enough to him, because he was able to defend from the Ferraris in a racing bull.
Yeah.
So very, very well done. Yeah, so we'll give Daniel that one.
Yeah.
Sauber, no real pace.
Nothing to talk about there, is there, with Sauber?
Nothing really much at all. I mean, obviously, Hulkenberg's been confirmed into that team now, so obviously it's going to be very close between kind of Bottas and Zhou for who kind of gets the extra seat, if any of them do at all. There's rumours that Bottas is going to be joining Williams next year, and Zhou is going to be kind of out of the sport because there's no real seats for him, and it's kind of shown because his pace just isn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've said before, we'll say it again. You know, there's so many good, talented drivers coming up through the ranks, and if you're just not performing, like Nick de Vries, for example, you're just have to go. You have to go elsewhere, aren't you?
The timing sheets don't lie in this sport, and if you are not quick enough, like Zhou isn't at the moment, that's life. I'm sorry. I mean, he was P20 in qualifying in both qualies, I think. And he's got to pick up the pace.
Absolutely. We'll move on to Haas.
Obviously, in the sprint, Magnussen, defensive lunatic, I'm going to say. He was just diving up left, right and centre, just didn't care, just throwing the car everywhere. And to be fair, after the race, because obviously he was able to build that gap to Hulkenberg, so that Hulkenberg could get points. Yeah. So the team player, and then after the interview, pen, he basically went, yeah, I did it for the team, I took the penalties, that's life. Yeah. So fair enough to him, owned up to it. He has got 10 penalty points now, which is not good for the rest of the season because those expire in March. So he's got a whole year basically to not get 2 penalty points. But I don't think Haas will be too annoyed about that because it would give a chance for them to stick Behrman in the car for a weekend.
True.
So I don't think Haas would be too annoyed about him getting a race ban.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So yeah, and obviously Hulk was unlucky to not getting points in the actual race, but got them in the sprint. So I think overall a very good weekend.
I think so for Haas, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's it. Obviously on to Imola next week. One of the best tracks, I think one of the drivers' favourite tracks, just for the scenery and everything. Yeah. And obviously we haven't been there in 2 years. So very much looking forward to that, and catch you in the next podcast. Goodbye.